Thank you for tuning in to episode 5 of Culture, Power, and the Pen. I'm your host, Andy, and in each episode, I'll sit down with writers, activists, and storytellers who use their words to reclaim identity, challenge narratives, and illuminate the experiences of their people. Today, I'm honored to welcome Mai Der Vang, award-winning poet, Pulitzer finalist, and one of the most powerful contemporary voices of the Hmong community. Through books like Afterland and Yellow Rain, she writes about the secret war in Laos, the Hmong refugee journey, and the contested history of Yellow Rain, drawing on family stories and oral traditions. In this conversation, we'll talk about how her early experiences with language and creative writing shaped her path, how community and place influenced her voice, and how Hmong oral tradition continue to inform her work. We'll also explore how she navigates writing about refugee histories and collective trauma with care, and how her poetry preserves stories often missing from mainstream narratives. Let's begin. So, what first drew you to poetry as a form of expression? Was there a specific moment in your life when writing began to feel essential?
I think writing for me started when I was still exploring the English language as a child. And I recall that in elementary school, I think it was in 5th grade or 6th grade, we spent time in class writing creative stories because my teacher, I had the same teacher for those 2 grades, 4th and 5th actually. And that particular teacher was very interested in creative writing. And so we did a lot of that in class. And that propelled me into my sort of first experience of creative writing. And I wrote stories, I wrote really short plays, I did some poems. And of course, at that age, I took none of that seriously, right? You know, those are things that you're just writing to write and to have fun. And so I have to sort of, thank those early teachers in my life who helped me see the value of creative writing and helped me to see potentially even my own interest and future aspirations with that.
Mm. So I know you kind of grew up in Fresno, California. So how did your family kind of community and surrounding shape your perspective and eventually the way kind of you write about the world?
Community has always been a really important factor in how I have thought about my writing and how I have engaged in it. I think it's, for me as a Hmong American, it's always been so crucial to feel connected somewhere, because you can go somewhere in the world and no one can know who you are and no one may even care who you are. But then when you go to a place where you know that there's a Hmong community, there's something about it where you just feel connected immediately to that place and you feel a sense of affinity with the people and with the experiences even of those people. So community has always been crucial to my work. And before I started writing seriously, I was also part of a collective named the Hmong American Writers Circle. And this was a small collective of Hmong writers who would get together once a month. And we would meet at local community centers. We would meet sometimes in each other's home. We would try to save up money so that we could put together a small retreat for ourselves. We were very grassroots in that sense. And we weren't even a 501c3. So a lot of what we were doing was, again, just very grassroots and with what we could, what could scrape by to do something with. And that group has been so instrumental in helping me to sort of forge my writing path and career, because I learned so much from some of my peers in that group. I learned about, the world of publishing. I learned about, craft and sort of the pros and cons of pursuing an MFA. And so because of this group and because of the community that we built in this group, it allowed me to then sort of go out into the world and really pursue and put my writing to work. So community has been instrumental. And then also my family, I grew up, like you said, I grew up in Fresno. My family is here. My community is here. I also teach at Fresno State in the MFA program, so I also have an academic community that I'm proud to be part of. And so for me, Fresno is home. Even though Fresno is a city that has its own problems too, it's home for me, and it's been home for my work as well.
So I know, the Hmong culture, like there's a really rich oral tradition. So how does that sort of influence the way you approach the written word and, poetry?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think about that question a lot. And when I first started writing poetry, that was sort of something that I had to come up against quite a bit in my thinking about craft and about language and about sort of the power of the oral tradition that is so rooted in Hmong culture, or Hmong culture being so rooted in that oral tradition. I'm grateful and I'm proud to be from a community that is a rich oral history. We didn't have a written writing system until the 1950s. And of course, no surprises, that system was created by missionaries whose purpose was to evangelize Hmong villagers in Laos. And so they created the RPA writing system so that they could then communicate with villagers. And so that is the system that most people use today. And there was another writing system that was created too, a more indigenous writing system that was based on a script. And that system has been sort of slowly lost over time due to some pretty tragic circumstances. But yeah, I think about the oral, the oral sort of tradition quite a bit when I approach my work. I sometimes have wondered myself, should I even be writing? Should I even be doing written work? Should I be writing in Hmong? What is the function of me even writing in English? And then I've also considered the Hmong tradition of gutia, which is a form of sung poetry that our elders have practiced, and many of them are masters at this very beautiful art form. And I've also considered the power of that traditional artisan practice within my own craft. And so all of these things have really impacted the way that I've thought about my own writing. And so, of course, I write in English mostly, although I do read and write in Hmong. And I, sometimes will integrate Hmong language and Hmong verbiage into my poems. But for me, I think that for English being such a language that is widely dominant and that has pretty much conquered almost every culture out there. It's for me a language to sort of immerse in, so that I can figure out the ins and outs of that language, to then recreate from that language, recreate from English what I want to see for myself, or what makes sense to me as someone who is a native Hmong speaker. So yeah, lots of questions and still things I'm thinking through as I consider the complexity of Hmong, of the oral traditions in Hmong culture. But it is something that I am very proud of, knowing that I come from a community where this isn't the norm. It isn't the norm to write. At least it wasn't the norm to write. It wasn't the norm to put text onto paper. And then to see that that's shifted today is also exciting. But to see that there's also this interest to preserve those oral traditions, to me, is even more exciting.
Mm-hmm. So do you mind kind of elaborating a little bit more on the topic of, the song poet? Because that was something that, when I had my podcast with Kalia, that she also kind of talked about. It was actually also one of her books.
Yeah, one of her books is the song poet sort of a memoir and retelling of her father's life. And it's a beautiful, beautiful just well-crafted and rich book. I love that book. It's one of my favorite books. And when I think about that complex history of Gutia, and when I say complex, I mean it's so rich. It's so full of emotion, and it's hard to explain in English sometimes what it means, right? To someone who hasn't engaged in or heard it, or maybe can even, like, for me, when I hear the Gutia, it's not always, for me, easy to decipher the words that are coming through, but there's something about the tone and the motion that a Gutia practitioner can convey to a listener that is so deeply moving, and that just reaches into your core and your soul. And Hmong is a very tonal language, so when you change the slight tone of a word, it can change the entire meaning of that word. And so to hear those tones shifting in and out, up and down, all, and throughout a Gutia song is really quite lovely. You get a full range of sounds when you listen to a Gutia practitioner share their art. And for me, I think it's something that I've also thought about. How do I sort of transfer some of this knowledge into the way that I think about my poetry? For me as a poet, sound is one of the most important considerations I make when I'm writing a poem. I'm really, really thinking about the way that words sound. I'm thinking about how many syllables are in a word. I'm not as obsessed over meter as other poets might be, or as some of our classical poets were, but I'm really sort of attentive to the way that sound can help create an interesting experience for a listener, in the same way that Gutia does that as well.
How has, your parents' experience, as Hmong refugees shape your understanding of displacement, resilience, and cultural preservation? And how does that influence the way you approach poetry?
I think for my parents, both of whom are refugees from Laos, and both of whom were then resettled in the United States in the early 80s, right about the time that I was born. So, they came and then I was born. They were first resettled in the Twin Cities, and then they relocated with other relatives and the rest of the clan to Fresno, and then I was born in Fresno. So that all happened within less than a year. And so, their experiences when I was a child, of course, I had no idea about the circumstances and conditions of the war that brought them to this country as refugees. I had no understanding of that. And, as a child, no one explains that stuff to you. No one sits you down and says, well, this is why you're here. This is what we saw in the old country. This is the trauma that we've accrued as a result of this U.S. government's proxy war. No one explains any of that to you. And you sort of go through your childhood just grasping for answers as to why your parents are the way that they are. And when I say the way that they are, I mean why they can be emotionally distant, or why it seems as though sometimes, they can't break through to you as the child to connect with you. And I had those very sort of typical struggles with my own parents as a child of refugees, and as a child growing up during the height of the refugee resettlement years, which was like the 80s. And so, I didn't understand any of that. And it wasn't until I went away to college, and, when you're out there in the world on your own, you're no longer under the shelter of your parents, and you can sort of explore. You can, you kind of find your own bearings, right? And it wasn't then until college when I myself learned about the Secret War and about the devastation of that war and the aftermath of it, that I began to then piece together what my parents had been through. And it was then that I began to sort of develop a greater sort of maybe compassion or just a greater awareness for the grief that they endured. And it's not the grief that they endured to bring us here so that we could have a better life, but the grief that they endured, and also the grief that they left behind. I think when we talk about the refugee experience, we often talk about refugees as wanting to leave a place, or we try to imagine that they're people who just want to escape and they need to leave. But I think the other part of that narrative too is that there were so many refugees who didn't want to leave, who couldn't bring themselves to walk away from their homeland, and there were those feelings as well. So it's a very complicated feeling. It's not just this black and white feeling of, okay, we need to leave this country, although that was the case for a lot of people. But it was sort of wrapped up into these emotions of, we may never see this country again this way as it was, in the way that we remember it and lived it. And so all of that, I think, came to me eventually as I got older, and as I began to, again, develop that awareness. And part of that awareness came because I went looking for it myself. It wasn't forced upon me. It wasn't something that I was pressured to do. It wasn't like someone demanded I go and research my history. It was something that I sought out because I felt I needed to find another way to connect with my parents, and I didn't want to force that connection either. So I just went and I tried to see what I could learn on my own before I then went to them to ask them about the war too, which I eventually did in my later years.
So, when you were like sort of younger, your parents didn't really share about, their experience kind of like coming to the United States and kind of the difficulties that they were undergoing, and that was something that you sort of found out later on as you got into college, right?
Yes, and yeah, and so it was, the early years were just full of questions, and sometimes my parents would actually refer to things about the war, and it didn't, when I was a child, there were things that my mom really disliked. Like, she disliked the sound of fireworks on the 4th of July, and I didn't understand why. Like, what's wrong? They're just fireworks, but for her, it was really resonant and re-triggering of the sound of explosions and bombs, things like that. And then there were other times where they would just say things to us like, oh, we were running all day and all night. And I'm like, well, why? I didn't understand as a child why that was the case. But of course, it's not going to be that crystal clear to a child yet until later on in life, when they have a much better understanding of the world, right?
Yeah. And, both of your poetry collections, like Afterland and Yellow Rain, both deal with, loss and survival, like in these themes. So how do you navigate writing about, collective trauma without speaking for, others' pain and experience?
Yeah, definitely. I say up front that I speak for myself, right? And I don't speak on behalf of the entire Hmong community. And I share my story. I share my family story. I share my own experiences and experiences that I have, that I have seen growing up. And then in the case of Yellow Rain, that to me, even though, it's not something that I can say directly happened to me, right? Because I obviously didn't live through Yellow Rain. But to me, as a descendant, as a Hmong descendant, and as a child of refugees, I think with Yellow Rain, it felt so much a part of who I was and who I am today. And I just, and also when I've asked my parents, I said, about Yellow Rain, they've told me, they said, yeah, we believe something happened. We believe something happened, and we just know, that's what we've heard, is that there were people who died from this mysterious substance. And so for me, it's about, really rooting myself in my experience as a descendant, as a child of Hmong refugees, as someone who, again, grew up during the height of the refugee resettlement years, and being able to then weave from those experiences something that maybe can tell both an individual story, but something that can then offer a collective understanding of what Hmong people have endured. And I've had many people come to me and say, thank you for writing Yellow Rain. Thank you for writing Afterland. I really resonated with what you shared in these poems, or in the case of Yellow Rain, which is always really heartbreaking for me to encounter, but also is not surprising either, is when Hmong readers have come to me and said, or Hmong people who have attended my readings have come to me and said, we have a relative who's died from Yellow Rain, or my parents say that our uncles suffered from Yellow Rain, or such and such, or we had a relative die mysteriously for something that sounds just like Yellow Rain. So that to me also is really encouraging to hear that people are connecting with these stories, even though I'm, writing them from my own perspective. It is something, like I said, that can be shared, and can be still can still resonate outside of my own experience.
Yeah, within the Hmong community, with all these shared experience, it's sometimes I would say easier to connect with one another. But would you say it's more of the difficult part about writing for a readership that is outside of the Hmong community that may not know much about Hmong history?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that question, about the idea of non-Hmong readers, right? Or readers who, like you said, are outside of the Hmong community, and then who don't have that context. And, I think that's going to be sort of a conflict, a conundrum, and maybe even an interesting challenge that I will always be up against as I am a Hmong American writer. I think these feelings were more pervasive during the publication of my first book, because I think when I wrote that first book, I had to sort of introduce myself to the world, and I had to introduce, and it wasn't that I was introducing Hmong people to the world, but I had to sort of, I was bringing something else to the landscape that wasn't and hadn't always been there, especially within the field of poetry. And I had to think about that. I had to think about sort of what compromises I would make in my writing to not feel like I had to explain everything to my reader, but to explain enough to my reader so that my reader would then know what was at stake, or why there was even a stake at all. And so there had to be sort of a very delicate balance with figuring out what was going to work and what was not going to work, how much was too much explaining and hand-holding, and how much was not enough. And I eventually got to a point where I just had to let go and write the poems that I wanted to write and that I needed to write. I can't get too caught up and obsessed with trying to explain everything, because there's a danger in that as well. There's a danger in not trusting my reader to do the work of unpacking the poem and then researching on their own about Hmong people. And then there's also the danger of what that can do to the poem as well. And so I eventually got to a point where I just said, you know what, I'm going to write the poems I want to write, and people will have to take it or leave it as it is. And I think that's when my poems were weirder, and my poems were then much more, in my opinion, at least interesting, because they weren't as direct or obvious as they could have been. And I think that allows for my reader to also bring in their perspective too. It creates a space for the reader to join me in the poem so that I'm not just, giving the reader all the answers. I think that's how I've sort of thought through the balance of how to engage non-Hmong readers in my work. I think with Yellow Rain, though, that was a very different experience, because Yellow Rain is such an obscure topic that even a lot of Hmong people don't really know the intricacies of it and the complexity behind it. So then, of course, with Yellow Rain, I did a lot of that sort of retelling of the issue and of the circumstances and of the timeline. But I think that with Yellow Rain, it was just something that was important to do, again, to help my reader understand what was at stake for Hmong history and for that Hmong voice to be able to come through and make sense to my reader as well.
Yeah, I really connected to the part when you talked about the balance between kind of writing for yourself and staying authentic, and also like reaching to a wider audience and helping them sort of understand what you're talking about. And moving on to a topic that's sort of lighter and talking about culture, the Hmong culture, traditions, and food. The Hmong New Year has always been like a really meaningful celebrations for many families. So do you have a favorite memory from those gatherings growing up?
Oh gosh, the Hmong New Year. I went to the Hmong New Year every year as a child. And then eventually every year also as during my high school years. I didn't go as much, I guess, during college because, I was away for college. I'd come back and, winter break was very short. And I think I did go maybe a few years. But, the Hmong New Year is definitely one of those traditions that you sort of partake in, whether you want to or not, especially as a child. And it's also one of those times of year that really, really for you reminds you, especially when you go to a place where it's primarily all Hmong people, like hundreds and maybe thousands of Hmong people sort of all gathered into this one space. Like you're around people who look like you and who talk like you. And it's the one time of the year where you get to feel that, to feel yourself in company with other people who are like you too. I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about the Hmong New Year. And I live in Fresno, so Fresno has the largest one in the country, maybe even internationally. There are a lot of people who come from other states and maybe even from overseas to partake in the Hmong New Year here in Fresno. I think some of my best memories, though, were sort of my early days of the Hmong New Year when I was like a child in high school, because after that, the Hmong New Year began to sort of shift due to sort of the planning and even some politics, local politics got involved with the way that it was configured. So they changed some things about the Hmong New Year. But I remember as a child, you'd go, it was always very cold and you'd you just walk around, your feet would get tired. But the best things were like eating the food, and having tapioca and just like sitting in a cold tent, trying to chew some Hmong sausage and purple rice, those were it was always uncomfortable, but it was always great, in that regard. And I don't really have one specific memory, but I did have multiple times in high school where it became a place where you could then meet other people that you might be interested in. And I had those experiences. My high school boyfriend and I, we hung out at the Hmong New Year, and it was like really cool to walk around with your boyfriend at the Hmong New Year. And I had those experiences, and we would dress up in Hmong clothes. And so I think that's what it was, really, a chance to sort of like socialize and to experience and be immersed with other people who are, there just to sort of enjoy and do the same things that you're doing.
Okay, so you mentioned, the Hmong sausages and, tapioca, but if you were to pick one, what would be your sort of favorite Hmong dish, and, who in your family makes them the best?
Oh my gosh. Wow. My brother is the chef in our family, and he's incredible. Like, he works so hard to make these like large feasts for us. We're a family of mostly sisters, so he's so generous in cooking for all of us, and he has thought many years about trying to get a booth at the Hmong New Year too, but I can't pin it down to just one thing. He does make everything. He makes the Hmong sausage, although he hasn't made his own Hmong sausage. You typically can buy them at the store nowadays, but I think we recently had a gathering, and he made the steam rolls. They're like the rice steam rolls that are so delicious with like a sweet chili sauce. And they've got like a little bit of meat and mushroom in it. He's made fried noodles, which is delicious too. And then if I were at the Hmong New Year, I would go probably for your staples of like sausage or roasted chicken and sticky rice and pepper. Of course, you need your chili pepper too. So yeah, I think those would be my few favorites.
Do you think are there aspects of Hmong culture you feel are misunderstood or overlooked by outsiders? What would you want more people to understand?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, and it's something that has sort of come up in recent years, it would have to be the war. It would have to be an understanding of what really happened with this war, and what it means for why Hmong people are here today. Because I think, if I look back, into some of into the years where I was writing about the war, or even when I was studying the war, back in college, most of the language and most of the discourse is focused on this idea that Hmong people were simply recruited by the CIA to fight communism on behalf of the Americans. And that's true, yes. The CIA did recruit them to do that and to fight alongside the Americans. But over time, as I've done my research, and also even after looking and digging into Yellow Rain more, it really it's not just as simple as saying Hmong people were recruited. There were a lot of Hmong men and boys during that time who were coerced into fighting, and who were forced into these roles, and who had no choice but to become soldiers for the Americans. In other words, to become people who would carry out the war bidding of the United States government. And that to me smells of a proxy war. That to me smells of something far more sinister than just saying that they recruited Hmong soldiers and boys. Because, and that's where I think the tragedy is that I don't know that the language or the discourse has shifted yet to be able to say that this was really truly a proxy war, where the United States government used and exploited Hmong boys and men to do its war bidding. In other words, for these Hmong boys and men to die in the place of what would have been American soldiers, so that American soldiers could be spared, and so that America could then so then the United States could then fulfill its political and foreign agenda of warfare. I think that's, to me, what hasn't really fully broken through yet in the discourse, is to really call what happened a proxy war, a war of exploitation, a war of coercion, really. And I think that's what's missing. I think that's something that I think, is sort of misunderstood, even by some Hmong people too, who don't see what went wrong with the war either. There are Hmong people who are okay with what happened, and that's fine. That's their perspective, right? But I think I just want to be able to re-emphasize that what happened was the United States had a political agenda to fulfill, and there were also some international agreements and neutrality laws that prevented the U.S. from intervening in Laos. So instead of intervening directly, they went out and coerced and exploited these Hmong boys and men to do the work of war for them so that they could get around these neutrality laws. And that, to me, is part of the story that's missing.
So how do you see, the younger generations of Hmong, people and, writers, artists, like engaging with, these issues and their identity and storytelling? Are there any trends that really excite you or trouble you?
Yeah, I'm lucky to be working in a position as a professor and also teaching creative writing, to actually a couple of Hmong students. We're very lucky in our program to be one of the few programs and one of the few MFA programs across the country that has Hmong students in our MFA program, and Hmong students who are then obviously pursuing creative writing. And so I'm in the sort of fortunate position to be able to mentor a lot of these younger writers who are wanting to pursue creative writing in their career field. And I've been able to sort of help shape their thinking around craft, but also around Hmong discourse. And that's been really fortunate. And then I've also been able to support even, Hmong writers who are not students at Fresno State, who also then want to talk through, again, a lot of these really important topics around Hmong history. In fact, I just met with a student who isn't one of my official students, but is a student studying poetry in London. She's from California, but she's doing her MFA over there, or her creative writing degree over there. And she had tons of questions about Yellow Rain for me, and wanted to sort of really unpack that with me so that she could figure out how she might integrate that into her own work. So I do feel there's some promise in the way that some of the younger generations are absorbing a lot of these topics and a lot of these important sort of historical information. But I also think there's room to challenge the younger generation too, to keep pushing them to sort of think more deeply and critically about these histories, and I imagine that students who are studying fields outside of creative writing, which I don't work with often, I feel like there could be room to sort of challenge the discourse to think again more critically about the war and about sort of the implications of colonialism and empire as it relates to their identity and who they are and how their parents got here. So definitely, I'd say there's room to challenge our future generations even more in their critical thinking about those issues.
So how do you define, success as a writer, poet, or activist, and how has that sort of changed since you first started writing? Yeah,
success, is going to be different for everyone, and I think for me, it's always gonna, as with having published 3 books now. Most people, and having published numerous individual poems, to most people would say, okay, yeah, you've drummed up some sort of literary success having published that many things. So yeah, I guess publication. But I think I'm happy if at least one person reads my work and can feel something by it or from it, whether it's that they feel they resonate with it, or whether they feel sort of like sort of encouraged by it, or maybe they feel challenged or unsettled or troubled by my work. That's good too for me, I guess. I'm okay if people read something that I write and are troubled by it, because that also means that I've written something that has allowed a reader to have a response to it, whether positive or negative. And I think that to me is a way for me to know then that my work that my work is possibly coming full circle. When you write something, you never write with the intention of thinking to yourself, okay, someday I'm going to publish this, so how do I make sure that I write it to cater to my audience? At least for me, when I write something, I'm thinking about what the work needs, or trying to think about what the poem needs, as opposed to what the future reader might want it to need. And so when you finally get that work out, when you finish it, you send it to your editor, or you send it to the journal and they publish it, and then it's out there in the world and people are reading and engaging with it, then you feel that your work has maybe come, at least for that work, it's come sort of full circle. It's being shared, it's being engaged with. Not that every work needs to be shared. Some work is more personal that you write for yourself, but I think that to me is maybe how I can begin to sense that, okay, I'm getting somewhere with this, maybe not full success yet, but there's something happening, and I have to keep at it.
So what do you think are some ways people can support your work, or the Hmong community more broadly?
I guess to support the work, you can do what others do. You can read the work. That would be like the first and foremost important thing, is to read it. You can also do your own research and find out for yourself, so that you can then draw your own understanding and awareness of what you think happened and what this all means. And then, I'm always excited when folks want to engage. Happy to meet you at my readings if you come out to my readings. So even something as simple as just, looking something up and helping to sort of expand your own awareness can be a really important way to show your support for something. Yeah.
Are there any organizations, artists, or projects you're excited about right now that you feel like deserve more attention?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, of course, there's the work of Khao Kalia Yang, who I've been very lucky to know as a friend and as a sort of a colleague, and also even as a mentor. And, she just had another book come out recently, and this one focusing on her mother. So I really think that her work has really is really important, right? And it helps to sort of expand again that awareness. So maybe her, and then there are numerous literary organizations. My partner, who is one of the publishers at Noemi Press, they are an organization that I love, and I would encourage folks to check out their books and to buy their books, because they've been publishing some really amazing and innovative work. So Noemi Press, Noemi, is another sort of organization publisher to look into. My own press, Grey Wolf Press, too, is a sort of another great literary organization who has a rich publishing history too. So yeah, I guess those are the few things I can think of for now. I mean, there are so many literary organizations too out there doing such great work, and it's just finding somewhere where you sort of again resonate with, to then support and to help them sort of lift up their work. Yeah.
And so just, one last question. Are there any kind of projects or things you're currently working on that is, exciting and you're excited to share about?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I just, with having finished Primordial, which was my third book, I just thought, oh gosh, I needed a break, because I was writing and publishing a book every 4 years since my first book. And so I'm thinking, maybe I need a break. But then I've also, sometimes when you take a break where you don't write for a while, you start to feel, the ideas coming back to you. And so I do have a few things in mind, nothing concrete yet, but I've also, I'm still writing poetry and still exploring what I can do with my poems. I'm really, really interested in sort of pushing towards poetry that allows me to, again, create my own version for language and think through my own particularities with language. So I'm excited to see if anything comes out of these new thoughts I'm having about sort of form and craft of poetry. And then there are a couple of prose projects in mind, nothing concrete yet, but just sort of exploring still.
Well, that will be the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for your time and contributions.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate talking to you.